The following program contains footage that may disturb some viewers.
This breaking news just in. It's shortly after 7 o'clock this evening. A commercial airliner crashed outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've been told the plane was U.S. Air Flight number 427. First estimates are that there are over 130 people on board. We don't yet know if there are any survivors. Investigators from the NTSB are on their way from Washington to begin looking into the cause of this tragedy.
This is the worst I've ever seen, and if there is anything worse, I hope I never see it.
An airplane falls from the sky, a train derails, a pipeline explodes, a bridge collapses. When these deadly events occur, it's the job of one organization to find out why it happened and what can be done to keep it from ever happening again. The National Transportation Safety Board.
On the calm, clear evening of September 8, 1994, U.S. Air Flight 427 fell out of the sky, slamming into a wooded hillside at over 300 miles an hour. For the team of investigators whose job it was to find out why, this tragedy would become one of the greatest mysteries in the history of aviation. It happened without warning. At just after 7 o'clock, air traffic controllers cleared Flight 427 en route from Chicago for landing. Nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary. Then, at exactly 7:03, they received a transmission from the pilot. 427 emergency.
U.S. Air 427, Pittsburgh.
Moments later, the plane disappeared from the radar screen.
U.S. Air 427, radar contact lost.
Following protocol, the Pittsburgh Tower immediately contacted the FAA's National Communications Center in Washington, D.C. Minutes later, the FAA contacted the National Transportation Safety Board. The lead aviation investigator on call was Tom Houter.
I was notified, within about 10 minutes of the accident. The Pittsburgh Tower reported the aircraft was missing and they could see smoke on the horizon.
Houter immediately began to assemble a team of NTSB investigators. At the time, all they knew were a few basic facts.
9:30 tonight, every man's fantasy comes to Channel 9.
25 sultry stunners, all lining up for their very own piece of view.
What guy wouldn't want to?
The Bachelor phenomenon is back with the hottest contestants yet.
Just knockout gorgeous.
All new ladies going to the wildest lengths to land their millionaire.
I would do whatever it takes. I'm a vixen in the bedroom.
Who would you choose?
Who will he choose?
The Bachelor 3 premieres 9:30 tonight on Channel 9.
Most people don't give their vehicle's battery a second thought. Some people have to. The Exide batteries in the world's most advanced submarines are relied on to keep their crews alive at close to 500 meters below the surface. So if you want a battery you can rely on, choose Exide, the most relied on batteries in the world.
You think you don't got what the chicks think is hot? You better call a tint professor. Yo, he'll take your car and leave you one for free. He'll tint your windows for life, that's a professor guarantee. It's cool, no fool, the dark teeth will rule, and the trick is to pick and be slick for the chicks. Now that's what I call a happy ending with the free mail waste. Yo, the best for less off, the tint professor. Way cool with the tint professor, 9874-8644.
If you want all the latest technology and newest models, up Date now at Retrovision. The Hoover 7-kilo washer is just $749, and the Nilfisk 1600-watt vacuum are low $189. The Westinghouse 280-litre fridge is only $699, and Remington men's shavers are just $64.90, plus a bonus sports travel bag with every TV over $300.
Your decision is Retrovision. We've got it.
He's always had the best intentions.
I'm probably a bit of a procrastinator.
So when will he finish the job?
Some things take time.
And they take their toll.
I'm the most patient person I know.
Help us on its way.
It's going to be a big day.
Television's handiest new team.
Brilliant.
Rebuilding homes.
This is not my house.
And rebuilding relationships.
Oh, God.
Mitre 10 presents DIY Rescue, 7:30 Tuesday on Channel 9.
U.S. Air Flight 427 had originated at O'Hare Airport in Chicago at just after 6 p.m. that evening.
Basically, 427 was a regularly scheduled flight for Chicago to Pittsburgh. By that time of the evening, it's normally filled. A lot of business people coming back from day trips. There's 132 people on board.
Prepare for departure. Cross-check, please.
All in all, it was a normal flight. Weather that evening was beautiful. There was no reason to expect this aircraft should go down.
The plane was a Boeing 737, considered to be one of the safest commercial airliners. Since it was first introduced in the 1960s, 737s have flown over 91 million flight hours, carrying the equivalent of the population of the entire world. Flight 427 departed Chicago at 6:10 p.m. 45 minutes later, it began its descent into Pittsburgh.
The flight crew had said nothing to air traffic control indicating a problem prior to the upset. It was only on the way down that one of the flight crew members reported U.S. Air 427 emergency, but they did not provide any information as to what the emergency may have been. The airplane just vanished from radar.
People in the parking lot of the Green Garden Shopping Plaza in Hopewell, Pennsylvania, saw the plane disappear behind the trees of a nearby hillside. Reporter Bill Adair wrote a prize-winning series of articles about the crash.
This happened on a sunny afternoon in September. The soccer games were in full swing just down the hill from where the crash occurred. Lots of people saw the plane fall out of the sky.
We got an airplane crash, Green Garden Plaza.
The engine caught on fire about 80 feet before it went to the trees, and then the fireball came up and engulfed everything. And I saw pieces flying.
One of the first agencies dispatched to the scene was the Hopewell Volunteer Fire Department.
Call came in as a commercial airliner down. And we all kind of looked at each other. You know, we're looking outside, it's a sunny day. It's gorgeous out. You mean a commercial airliner come down? You know, not here.
You couldn't see the plane from the street, so they left the fire engines on the street and ran up the hill. As they got into the woods, they began to see small pieces of the airplane. One of the police officers turned to a firefighter standing where the nose of the plane hit and said, "Where's the airplane?" And the airplane was all around them. It had disintegrated. It had broken into hundreds of thousands of pieces.
You couldn't do anything. It was over before you got there. It's like somebody took your chance to help somebody away. Not just once, but 132 times. That was the biggest empty feeling I think I've ever had, being amongst a couple of hundred people. I have never in my life felt that alone.
It's just difficult to describe. There's no one alive there. It's debris everywhere, and body parts and bodies everywhere. It's going to be a very, very, very tough day tomorrow.
As it hit the airwaves, news of the crash began to reach the family members of victims.
I was at work when I heard that there was a plane crash, and my brain didn't even register that my father was out of town. He traveled a lot. I was the last in our family to see him, had dinner with him before he flew off to Chicago.
A couple minutes after 7, an announcement broke in and said there was a plane crash. And kind of struck me because my wife had just called at 6 o'clock and said she was getting on a plane to come to Pittsburgh.
I finally called my mom, I suppose it was around 9 then, and said, "Is he home yet?"
And I tried to call the numbers that were on TV, and all they would do was take your name and phone number and say they would get back to you. I tried calling everywhere.
As the night wore on, officials in a conference room at U.S. Air headquarters were still attempting to confirm a complete passenger list.
One of the problems back in 1994 was that passengers did not have to show a photo ID to get on a plane like they do today. There's no guarantee that who's on the ticket is really the person who gets on the plane. People were calling in, crying, screaming, shouting, demanding to know if their relative was on the plane, and U.S. Air couldn't tell them.
U.S. Air refused to give out any confirmations until the entire passenger list was complete, forcing many families to endure an entire night without knowing.
The airline didn't call until 2:30 in the morning, and then they just said, we regret to inform you that Janet Stamus was on the plane, and there were no survivors, and somebody will call you tomorrow.
By the following morning, the NTSB team had arrived at the crash site.
What was amazing, there were just pieces of aircraft everywhere. And as we started getting closer to the center of the wreckage, there were more pieces of bent aluminum, but there was no discernible airplane.
Very surreal experience. There were bits and pieces of wreckage strewn through the trees. I think the first emotion that I had was it was going to be a big job.
Also on site were investigators from the FAA, Boeing, U.S. Air, and the Airline Pilots Union, called in by the NTSB to assist in the investigation, an arrangement known as the party system.
The investigation, of course, is run by the NTSB. We get invited by the NTSB to bring technical expertise to the investigation.
We bring an insight into the day-to-day operation of an airliner. And so NTSB invites our expertise to assist them in the investigative process.
But the party system adds an interesting dimension in that the people who could be blamed for the crash, the manufacturer, the pilots, the airline, are part of the investigation.
The investigation began with the arduous task of collecting evidence. Hundreds of pieces of shattered airplanes strewn across the accident site.
You want to get the components documented before it rains, changes the site. Every minute that the wreckage is there, it is deteriorating. So speed's essential.
As people move around the wreckage site, doing other jobs with the wreckage, you could lose information and data. So you try to get an idea of what things you need to capture first because they may disappear.
Their first priority was to find the key moving parts of the plane: engines, wings, flight controls. They also searched for clues below the surface. The topsoil near the point of impact was unearthed and carefully sifted through to locate even the smallest fragments.
That's a piece of the wing that happens to be actually the left wing on the airplane. It's all fragmented.
At the same time that NTSB investigators were looking for pieces of the plane, another group, the Allegheny County Delta team, was assigned the grim task of collecting body parts.
The Delta team was made up of volunteers from within the county maintenance department. There were electricians, carpenters, laborers, heavy equipment operators.
And I can remember going into the woods about maybe 50 yards, 60 yards. At first you couldn't tell what it was, but then after you come up upon it, you could make out it was a torso.
What I was expecting was you would find some bodies laying around, and that certainly wasn't the case. The fact is that there was not one full body recovered.
One of the first things I remember walking by was a hand that was laying on the ground. It was a girl's hand and it had an engagement ring on it.
Okay, you need a zip-lock bag or you got one?
We brought the refrigerated trailer truck as far off the road as we could. And he parked it there each morning, and then we would bag the stuff up. Most of it was just going in little sandwich bags and stuff like that. That's how small of pieces we were dealing with.
The body parts were taken to the Allegheny County Coroner's Office to be identified, using fingerprints, dental records, and jewelry. Of the 132 people on board, coroners were able to identify partial remains of all but 7. Now, it was up to the NTSB to find out what could have caused this tragedy.
That's all the more I can say. I'm sorry.
As with every major airline crash, NTSB investigators had to contend with a news-hungry media, eager for quick answers.
The first day, every potential expert and non-expert is more than happy to speculate on what they think caused the accident.
A couple of days after the crash, the first cause du jour was that one of the thrust reversers might have deployed in flight.
If you're flying along with two engines and both are going forward and one of them suddenly reverses, you can imagine the consequence that it would have.
There was another theory that a drug dealer on the plane who was coming back from being interviewed by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago had been the target of a big mafia hit.
For the NTSB, every reasonable possibility had to be investigated.
The FBI was on scene, and we had bomb specialists to go through the aircraft carefully, look at any evidence at all of fire explosion prior to the impact.
There were also lots of crackpots who called with a variety of theories. One person who called and saw the word hydraulic written in the clouds. There were people who thought that it was Russian death rays, that the devil did it. All these people called the NTSB in the first few days after the crash.
It becomes frustrating at times because everybody wants to solve it now. What's going on right now? We need the sound bite. Tell us tonight what happened. And we can't do that. We won't speculate.
The worst thing we can do in any investigation is find the wrong thing wrong, because we would go fix it, the manufacturer might change it, the FAA might change rules, and then everyone would think that it's okay because we fix it. If we fix the wrong thing, we haven't done anything.
The process of finding out what went wrong began at a hangar at the Pittsburgh airport, where the recovered pieces of the wreckage were taken.
Once we document in the field the condition that they're in, we'll try to take them to a better facility to work on, either a hangar or a building nearby the accident site where we have some shelter.
And we laid them out in the general positions they'd be found on the airplane. So we had on the floor a two-dimensional aircraft laid out of all these various pieces, whatever we found, anything.
An NTSB investigation is best described as a slow process of elimination. Each piece is carefully examined for damage, each component tested, every possibility considered.
We took the components one by one and tested them to try to ensure that we understood to the best degree that we could factually what was functioning and what wasn't at the point of impact.
One of the first pieces of hard evidence was a small wad of organic material found inside one of the jet's engines. It immediately raised the possibility of a bird strike.
They know a crime has taken place.
Behind you.
He had it coming. Who had it coming?
But without evidence.
This cannot be right.
Will a killer walk free?
There's a body in there, and that guy knows where it is.
CSI, 8:30 Tuesday.
Then at 9:30, drugs and erotica. The stinger set, and someone's not invited.
Got to keep church right out of this.
But that won't stop him.
We're out of here.
No!
Because he's connected to the crime.
If you don't like what I'm doing, stiff.
CSI and Stingers, Tuesday on 9.
Discount Electrical Centre's massive clearance up to 60% off sale. DEC 34cm AV stereo TV, $169. Ultra Slim Mirror Finish DVD, half price, only $199. DEC 54cm stereo TV, only $239. Super Double Deal 72cm stereo TV with Ultra Slim DVD, an insane $599. Also save up to 60% on fridges, washers, dishwashers and microwaves. Discount Electrical Centres, Campbellfield, Collingwood, Essendon, Dandenong, Northcote, Ringwood and Geelong. Hurry while stocks last.
Just stop everything. Just Fitness are having a mega stock take sale. Everything must go. Just look at these crazy prices. How about this great bike? 50% off, now just $199. Compact home gyms, $299. Beat the cold. Electric treadmills running out for $895. What about a bench set? Now just $199. There's much, much more. But hurry, stocks are limited. Don't miss the Just Fitness mega stock take sale on now at Just Fitness. Hawthorne, Heidelberg, Frankston and Hallam.
My name's Danny.
Centacom introduces the small platform personal computer featuring Intel Celeron 1.7 GHz, CD rewriter, Windows XP Home Edition. Packed with multimedia features including Firewire connections. With many different models to choose, our prices start from only $1,299, including a free HB colour printer. Call now on 1300 302 712. Ask Centacom about getting the full experience on your PC.
9:30 Wednesday, she's young, sexy and very missing.
She's been gone 6 days.
A mystery girl with a chilling secret.
It's like a different person.
Many faces of Eve.
But with no clues and no witnesses.
We don't know what she looks like, we don't know where she is, and we don't know when she disappeared.
The race is on to find her.
She was in my car, but that's not what happened.
I'm not giving up on this girl.
Before she goes missing permanently. The hit new series Without a Trace, following an all-new CSI Miami, 9:30 Wednesday on 9.
1960, a plane leaving Boston, Massachusetts, flew into a flock of starlings, stalling 3 of its 4 engines. The plane crashed in the harbor, killing 62 people. The patch of material found on 427 was sent to the Smithsonian Institute's Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., so it could be examined by Roxy Laybourne, the world's leading expert on forensic feather identification.
An investigator from National Transportation Board brought me this material that was taken from the aircraft. They wanted me to identify it because they wanted to make sure whether there was a bird involved in this aircraft incident.
Laybourne had developed a method for identifying the specific species of bird by using as little as a single strand from one of its feathers.
When I began examining the material, it looked like grains of sand and dirt and maybe some wood fiber in it. I saw nothing to indicate there was a bird. Well, I tried. I really did. And I put it under the binocular scope. I told them I could find no feather.
As the search for answers continued, a new voice began to make itself heard. The family members of crash victims, many of whom felt they had been mistreated by the representatives assigned to them by U.S. Air.
These people were not ready to handle any of this. They were just pulled from anywhere they could be, put on a phone and told, console these people.
2 weeks after the crash, U.S. Air arranged for the unidentified remains to be buried at a cemetery near the crash site. The families were never consulted. The headstone made no mention of how 132 people had died. To channel their frustrations, a group of them formed the Flight 427 Air Disaster Support League.
When we got together and we sat down, people talked about how they were treated. All these things came up. The fact that the people that were there to help us were not trained, sometimes did more harm than good. The notification was no good, that it took too long.
In January 1995, they held a news conference to draw public attention to their concerns and their demands.
At the very beginning, and that number was invalid, a telephone number to call about information. It wasn't correct.
It's not just U.S. Air, it's a problem in the airline industry.
Their outcry shed light on the fact that no organization existed to address their concerns. Though the NTSB traditionally kept its distance from victims' families to maintain objectivity, Chairman Jim Hall agreed to meet with them.
And we sat and listened to the families' stories of how they had been treated as a result of that event. I knew right then that one of the things I had to do if I could was change the way families were treated in the wake of a major aviation accident.
One of their requests was unprecedented.
We wanted to see the plane, and we asked the NTSB about it. I guess I was motivated by the thought of I was worried about something sneaking up on me later because I hadn't dealt with it, and I just wanted to face as much as I possibly could and deal with it. And like I would look up at planes in the sky and say, you know, I'm determined to conquer your power over me, you know.
Until now, crash wreckage had been strictly off limits to all but official investigators. Despite objections from insurance lawyers, Hall granted their request.
Well, since we had the ownership of the wreckage and it was all in an airline hangar at the Pittsburgh airport, I told them that we would make that available for them.
The NTSB had a chartered bus that took us out to the airport, and we went in and saw the wreckage. We noticed there were 3 dumpsters there, and a lot of people had questions about what was in the dumpsters. We got permission to go up there and look at the dumpsters. They picked up the dumpster and dumped it on the floor, and we went through it.
That's a calculator. Is that what it is? Yeah.
And we found 14 bags of clothing. We found some rings, watches, calculators, a lot of things that people actually claimed and were very glad to get. In fact, the one guy that was with us found his wife's briefcase.
For the families, it was a small bit of closure, but for the NTSB, the mystery was only just beginning. When a commercial airliner crashes, one of the first clues investigators look for are its black boxes.
The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were recovered actually the night of the accident by a representative of the FAA, and they were brought back to Washington the following morning.
The black boxes are in fact not black at all, but orange to make them easily visible during recovery. Sealed inside a steel shell, designed to absorb the impact of the crash and shield against fire and water, is a small tape recorder that records to a continuous tape loop. The first of the 2 boxes is called the CVR, or Cockpit Voice Recorder. It records the last 30 minutes of sound in the cockpit, including any noises, alarms, or words spoken by the pilots or crew. By federal law, the only people who can listen to it are members of the NTSB's investigative team. The sounds you're about to hear are a computerized text-to-voice version made from the transcript released to the public.
We should be on the ground in about 10 more minutes. Sunny skies, little hazy, temperature 75 degrees. At this time we'd like to ask our flight attendants to please prepare the cabin for arrival and you to check the security of your seatbelts. Thank you.
The mood in the cockpit was professional but relaxed.
Thanks for being patient with us today.
The first officer flying this leg had just told a joke. He said that, oh, the sun's going to be in my eyes.
Like it was taking off in Cleveland yesterday, too. I'm just gonna close my eyes.
Can you tell me when we get close to the ground? And he chuckled at his own joke. That was the beginning of the upset period. The airplane shook within about half a second. He said, "Sheesh." The captain speaks during the upset period. He says, "Whoa."
Hang on, hang on. Hang on, hang on.
What the hell is this? Oh, God.
Oh, God. 427 emergency.
This is just seconds before impact. In the last few seconds, the captain is calling pull.
Pull, pull, pull.
The first time I heard the CVR, I was definitely impressed that whatever happened to the crew happened very quickly and without warning, and they didn't seem to know what had happened to them.
Dramatic as it was, the tape gave no obvious clue of what had gone wrong. The second black box is called the Flight Data Recorder. It keeps a record of the parameters measured by the plane's instruments, including altitude, airspeed, and direction. The problem was that the data recorder on Flight 427 was an older model that only recorded a limited amount of information.
Unfortunately, it only recorded 11 parameters of data. A modern recorder can record 300 more.
It didn't record enough of the information for us to be able to know precisely what the airplane's control systems were doing. You could see that the airplane was changing directions, but you couldn't tell what was causing that.
The data was not enough to tell them why the plane had crashed. To do that, they needed to find some way to build a complete picture out of a handful of pieces. That considerable task was taken on by a team of engineers from Boeing using a process called kinematics.
Kinematics applies to the study of the motion of the airplane and backing out the basic physical properties of how airplanes fly or how objects move. And we were able to apply those with some advanced mathematical techniques and extract the final control inputs from the airplane.
After weeks of meticulous analysis, they were able to construct a complete computer model of Flight 427's final 28 seconds. The model was then run on Boeing's MCAB simulator. The simulator's full motion base was able to precisely recreate the same G-forces that the crew felt. Inside, the controls on a replica 737 cockpit moved in a ghostly reenactment of the pilot's final efforts to save the plane. The simulation, coupled with the sounds from the cockpit voice recorder, allowed investigators to experience firsthand what happened in 427's cabin moments before the crash.
One of the things that surprised me the most is how quickly the windscreen filled with the ground. This was a very fast event from the time it occurred until the point that the airplane was hopelessly out of control.
The simulation also gave investigators their first solid clue of what might have caused the crash. Until 28 seconds before the plane hit the ground, there had been no indication of any problem whatsoever. At that moment, it took a dramatic turn to the left, what aviators refer to as a yaw.
So the airplane just suddenly yawed to the left. Taking a look at that, we tried to decide what could cause that amount of yaw. We found that the only device that could make the airplane yaw like that was, in fact, the rudder.
The rudder is a vertical flap on the plane's tail fin. It controls side-to-side movement, yaw, and is used primarily to stabilize the plane during takeoff and landing.
Based on our analysis, the only thing that could have caused the airplane to move as it did was the rudder going to its full left limit.
In aviation, a rudder going to its full limit is known as a hardover.
7:30 tonight. The block continues.
What is going on here?
If you thought there was nothing left to do.
Not fun.
If you thought you'd seen all the drama. These four couples have saved the best to last.
We'll come down and we'll give you an apology. That was bullshit.
Will the boys leave the show? An extraordinary episode as our couples move out. Toyota presents The Block, 7:30 tonight on 9.
Just stop everything. Just Fitness are having a mega stock take sale. Everything must go. Just look at these crazy prices. How about this great bike? 50% off, now just $199. Compact home gyms, $299. Beat the cold. Electric treadmills running out for $895. What about a bench set? Now just $199. There's much, much more. But hurry, stocks are limited. Don't miss the Just Fitness mega stock take sale on now at Just Fitness. Hawthorne, Heidelberg, Frankston and Hallam.
G'day, Cindy here, and I'm great in beds. With bedding packages you once could only dream about. You get a queen-size bed and then a spring mattress, a fitted sheet, a flat sheet, a continental quilt and cover, 4 pillows and 4 pillowcases. Everything you need to be great in bed. Like the Lawson at $4.99, the Aztec at $5.99, the Crafton at $6.99, and the Roxy at $6.99. Plus heaps more. Sydney Lounges and Bedding, factory direct, and still pay only $10 deposit with 1, 2 or 3 years to pay.
Now there's an easier way to get the trimmer waistline you've always wanted. It's the Ab Swing from Danos Direct. Target your upper and lower abs and your side obliques on one sensational fitness machine. Slide down the seat and your resistance is increased, so your workout gets harder. The Ab Swing fitness system can be yours for $149.95 plus postage and handling. Backed by Danos Direct's 30-day money-back guarantee and 12-month limited warranty. Phone 1-800-808-938 and order yours today.
You saw them on Strip Search. Now it's your turn to feel the force of Aussie Storm live on stage. 2 hours of pulse racing entertainment. Hot costumes, hot dancing, hot bodies. Australia's own homegrown male review is Aussie Storm. Spend the night with 8 of the hottest men in the country. Be blown away by Aussie Storm at a venue near you. Don't miss your chance to see the men from Aussie Storm. Tickets on sale now.
For investigators, this raised the unsettling reminder of another unsolved accident. In 1991, a United 737 had mysteriously crashed on approach in Colorado Springs.
Once again, everything seemed to be normal. They were lined up at the runway when suddenly the airplane seemed to roll to the right and spiral into the ground, killing 25 people.
Based on analysis of the flight data, investigators suspected that the crash had also been caused by an unexplained rudder hardover.
Once again, we were hampered by a lack of data. The aircraft was severely destroyed, fragmented. Most of the components could not be tested.
But after a year of painstaking investigation, they could find no hard evidence to explain the crash.
The report had the words "for undetermined reasons" on the cover. It was a big, embarrassing admission that they, in effect, were not able to do their job.
We do hundreds of accidents every year. We determine probable cause in almost all of them. Not to be able to determine probable cause is something we do not like at the safety board, because if we don't know what happened, we don't know how to fix it.
The investigation also turned up reports on a number of non-fatal incidents in which pilots had reported rudders on 737s moving on their own, including a 1991 incident that happened to pilot Jim Gault.
Unscheduled rollovers of 737s that have made quite a bit of news lately. Well, I had one going into Reno. The airplane pitched up and rolled to the right, and I applied controls in the opposite direction, and the airplane continued to roll to the right.
To some, the evidence suggested that there was a hidden problem in the 737's rudder. As a precaution, in 1996, the FAA established stronger testing standards for 737s, and Boeing made a number of changes to the rudder system, even though no one had been able to prove that anything was wrong with it. US Air 427 raised the stakes dramatically. 132 people had lost their lives. Investigators were determined to find out why.
We wanted to know what caused the rudder to move. Two things that most likely was either the crew moved the rudder or the rudder moved itself.
Did one of the pilots stomp his foot on the pedal, or was there some sort of a malfunction in the rudder that made it suddenly swing to the left?
A key clue came from air traffic control records.
We knew from air traffic control that there was a 727 in front of the airplane. When we started to look at the data from the flight data recorder, we noticed some small disturbances, and we suspected that the airplane may have encountered the wake vortex of the preceding 727.
A wake vortex, made visible in the simulation, is a narrow stream of air turbulence created by a plane's wingtips. Boeing engineers were able to determine the precise moment when 427 hit the wake from small heading changes picked up by the flight data recorder.
The turbulence was the first link in the chain of the accident. Once the airplane encountered this turbulence, it never returned to wings level flight.
In order to explore what effect the wake vortex had on a 737, the NTSB conducted an unprecedented series of tests that exactly recreated the flight paths of the two planes.
What we did was we put smoke generators on the wingtips of the 727, and these generators are similar to what you'll see airplanes using in air shows, and this allowed the pilots to see exactly where the wake vortex were.
They would trail the 727 with a smoke generators going, and you could now see these wake vortices. And they were very interesting. They aren't a straight line. It's kind of like a rope in the sky. It's a twisting, twirling sort of thing. Then they could fly the airplane actually into a vortice, and they could fly it in, wings in, body in, fin in, whatever they wanted to do, and see what the reaction was.
Their first question was, could the vortex alone cause the plane to crash?
The vortex itself would not cause the amount of yaw we needed for the upset. In each case, the vortex would kind of throw the airplane out, and it could quickly recover. In fact, even with no input to the controls at all from the autopilot or the pilots, the airplane would recover itself and fly out.
But what if one of the pilots, to stabilize the plane after it hit the wake, had stepped on the rudder pedal, triggering something to go disastrously wrong? The rudder on a 737 is controlled by two sets of foot pedals, one for each pilot. The pedals are attached to cables that are connected to a hydraulic control in the tail of the plane, which in turn moves the rudder. The search for what might have gone wrong began with the wreckage.
We found the cables and the pedals and everything, all the linkages in the wreckage.
A clue from the plane's maintenance log led to what became known as the fat guy theory. What if an overweight passenger had stepped through a hole in the floor?
One of the things that we found was in the review of the maintenance log of the airplane, a note that a repair had been done to the floor above which the rudder cable actually traveled the length of the airplane. The question came up, could someone have stepped on that area of flooring and caused a depression of that rudder cable?
We went down into the cargo area and started hanging weights on the rudder cables.
And they watched the rudder and gradually made the fat guy fatter. And they started at 50 pounds and the rudder hardly moved. And they went to 100 pounds and the rudder moved just a little bit more, and on up to 250 pounds. And the rudder hardly moved at all. And so the fat guy theory was a bust.
Though every part was tested for every imaginable failure, the component investigators focused most closely on was the PCU, the Power Control Unit, a hydraulic valve located in the tail.
It's like power steering in your car, if you will. Where the pilot makes an input on the pedals, the power control unit turns that force into a larger force then that can move the surface.
Fortunately, Flight 427's PCU was one of the few parts that had not been destroyed in the crash. The first thing investigators wanted to know was if it had, for some unknown reason, jammed. The unit was taken apart and painstakingly scanned under a microscope, searching for any telltale mark that a jam had occurred. The PCU was then subjected to a battery of tests.
The best test we thought we could do was to run the same test that had been ran on it when it was manufactured.
Again, they could find nothing wrong with it. Determined to explore every possibility, investigators next tried to find some way, any way, to make it fail.
Next phases of testing was looking at the outer limits and the boundaries of what can you do to make this actuator fail.
So they ran every imaginable test. They tried contaminated rudder fluid, hydraulic fluid so gummed up with particulates that it was like cookie dough.
After weeks of testing, they could find nothing that would cause the valve to fail.
That left them scratching their heads. They didn't know what had made the rudder moved, and they were back to the fundamental question, man or machine?
In May 1996, Boeing investigators submitted a report that argued that the crash had been caused by pilot error.
The essence of what Boeing was presenting was that the crew encountered the wake vortex. They were startled, got on the controls quickly, and inadvertently pressed the wrong rudder pedal. As the situation became worse, rather than let up on the rudder pedal, they kept all the pressure in, and that's what caused the upset.
It was a very frightening experience. The ground comes up very, very fast, and it's very easy to see how a crew might have panicked.
Others on the investigating team were not so convinced.
I was satisfied in my own mind that we had an airplane issue, that this airplane, when it upset, was doing things that these highly experienced pilots had never seen before.
Well, I thought it was interesting, but I also was concerned that it was a quick and easy solution. That saying there's just pilot error, case goes away, wipes the chart clean, but is that really what's happening?
Despite these reservations, an NTSB team led by Malcolm Brenner began to dig deeper into the possibility of pilot error.
The purpose was to go in depth to see, is it plausible or possible that pilots could have made this type of input?
They began by taking an in-depth look into the background of the two pilots.
Both pilots were very experienced. I believe the captain had 12,000 hours of flight time, the first officer 9,000 hours. Neither pilot had any record of accidents or violations. Neither pilot had anything stand out unusual in terms of their past training or activities. The TOX results were negative. The families advised us that they were aware of nothing unusual and that there had been no major changes in terms of their financial situation or their personal lives.
The team also conducted studies of how other pilots behaved in similar situations.
With the cooperation of an airline in Europe, we monitored their fleet of 737s for more than a year. It covered more than 50,000 hours of passenger service under many conditions, weather conditions, and flight situations. In that time, there was never a case that a pilot entered full rudder for any reason. It did not occur. There are special studies where pilots report responses to wake turbulence. Pilots reported wake turbulences that were as startling and as upsetting as what the Pittsburgh crew would have gone through. most of them at lower altitudes, which is more dangerous. And in hundreds of cases, all the pilots recovered. There was no case of it resulting in an accident. One of the scenarios that I found most interesting was the possibility of a medical impairment, such as a seizure. And we examined records in terms of previous incidents that had happened. And remarkably, there were 2 previous incidents, both involving 737s, both on approach. And what we learned is what you would expect, is that in this situation, the other pilot can recover the airplane.
Wednesday, a twisted crime.
This ain't her boyfriend.
On the doorstep of Miami's first family.
They're American royalty.
And an ending you won't forget. All new CSI Miami, 8:30 Wednesday. Then,
young, sexy, and missing.
She's been gone 6 days.
No clues, no witnesses. The race is on to find her before she disappears permanently. All new CSI Miami and Without a Trace on 9's Big Wednesday.
Hi, I'm Peter Jackson. Here's a great suit deal. Buy one suit from my designer collection and get the second one free. All-season Italian and English fabric suits. Just buy one and get the second one free.
Wow. Peter Jackson.
Good and cheap clearance centre's ridiculous relocation sale. We're moving, everything must go. Picture frames from 95 cents, 20-piece dinner sets $12.95, bench grinders slashed to $49.95, electric drills a ridiculous $12.95, power dog food $1.69, single bed mattresses only $88, coffee tables a ridiculous $255, famous brand heaters only $49.95, Arlec door chimes half price at $17.50, good brands, cheap prices, $7.94 Burwood Highway, Ferntree Gully.
Over the last 100 years, we've supported families from all backgrounds. They've trusted us for generations. No 2 funerals are ever alike. After spending time with your family, our Lapine carers will help you choose the appropriate theme and location that truly reflects the individuality and personality of your loved one, a celebration of their life.
Lapine people handle with care the emotions of your family and loved ones. 24 hours a day, every day of the year, you can turn to the people at Lapine Funeral Services.
You think you don't got what the chicks think is hot? You better call a tin professor. Yo, he'll take your car and leave you one for free. He'll tint your windows for life, that's a professor guarantee. It's cool, no fool, the dark kid will rule, and the trick is to pick and be slick for the chicks. Now that's what I call a happy ending with the free mailways. Yo, the best for less off, the tin professor. Way cool with the tin professor, 9874-8644.
Hi, I'm Peter Jackson. Here's a great suit deal. Buy one suit from my designer collection and get the second one free. All-season Italian and English fabric suits. Just buy one and get the second one free.
Wow. Peter Jackson.
After over a year of investigating, Brenner's group could come up with no credible scenario to support the pilot error theory.
We couldn't explain why a pilot would enter full rudder in that circumstance. We couldn't explain why the pilot would enter full rudder in the wrong direction. We couldn't understand why a pilot would hold the rudder when clearly the airplane was going wrong. When changing it would correct it. And we couldn't understand why the other pilot would allow this to happen, since both pilots have the same controls and the same rudder responses.
After almost 2 years and millions of dollars, the investigation had reached a dead end. By the middle of 1996, the NTSB team investigating the crash of U.S. Air Flight 427 was running out of places to look for answers. Still, no one suggested giving up.
I think what kept it going was a group of people that we had that was dedicated to not stopping.
Nobody wanted to quit. We wanted to stay with it until we could find out what had happened.
There was no clear explanation. We had gone through a fairly thorough investigation at that point. There was a sense that we really had to go back and look in detail at areas we had looked at before or other possible directions.
Is there something else happening that we hadn't quite understood? And in fact, along came an incident called Eastwind 517 that gave us our first real insight as to what may be going on.
Eastwind 517 was a 737 that was en route to Richmond, Virginia, when without any input from the pilot, the rudder suddenly turned hard to the left.
The captain reported he stood on the left rudder pedal to stop the roll, put in opposite wheel, and the airplane didn't respond. The rudder pedal would not move. The event lasted about 15 seconds, then it went away.
This time, the pilot was able to regain control and safely land the plane.
After landing, the airplane was impounded and held so that we could do some tests on the airplane in its entirety.
We approached that airplane as being Pittsburgh in one whole piece, 427 in one whole piece.
It became the key to unlock the Pittsburgh accident.
We had a pilot who survived the east wind, stood there on the ramp and told us what happened, explained how it felt.
And that's the first time that we had that conclusive evidence that the rudder could in fact move uncommanded to its full deflection. So now the question is, okay, we now have proven to our satisfaction that it can happen, and to systems group the question came up, how?
The east wind incident triggered a renewed effort to find the elusive problem in the 737's rudder.
Our chairman, Jim Hall, requested we put together a panel of systems experts to take a look and see had we missed anything.
They had enlisted a panel that was known as the greatest minds in hydraulics. And one of the panel members remembered a test when a similar valve was frozen to simulate the conditions at 35,000 feet where it's very cold. And he suggested that they try a similar test.
The hydraulics group set up what was called a thermal shock test to see how the PCU reacted to extreme temperature differences.
The test basically involved taking the actuator unit itself and putting it in an icebox.
He injected hydraulic fluid at 180 degrees at a power control unit that had been cooled down to 30 degrees below zero to see what would happen.
No one expected a dramatic result. They froze the power control unit, pumped the hot hydraulic fluid into it, and could hear click, hiss, click, hiss, click, hiss. And then it just stopped, and they just heard hiss. And that indicated the valve had jammed.
Analysis of the test results revealed an even more alarming conclusion.
A Boeing engineer had been detailed to look into the results, and he pored over the numbers, looking for anything that might be out of the ordinary. And about 5 o'clock one night, several days after the test, he found something that shouldn't have been there. He looked at the numbers for the flow of the hydraulic fluid and saw that something was terribly wrong, that indicated that when the valve jammed, that it would actually reverse.
It'd be very much like driving your car over the years. It's always turned right when you turn the wheel right, and suddenly one day you turn the wheel right and it goes left. You're not going to figure that out in a short amount of time.
When a pilot depresses a rudder pedal to the right, he expects the nose of the airplane to move to the right. Years of experience, thousands of hours previous, every time he's depressed that rudder pedal, the airplane's moved in the same direction. In this case, it moved in the opposite direction.
Suddenly we had a failure mode that left no marks that would cause a rudder reversal. And taking a look at the valves, we found that these three valves, at least the east wind valve and the US Air 427 valve, were sensitive. They would reverse with very little amount of offset jamming, if you will.
The only problem was that such extreme thermal shock conditions could not have occurred in real life.
The conditions necessary to replicate this, in one Boeing engineer's words, wouldn't happen unless a 737 flew to the moon.
We all knew that there was very little chance that airplane actually had those conditions. We just tested and created an answer that we really didn't have the appropriate question for. I won't call it frustrating, but I know a lot of people were looking for us to provide them an answer, and I think there was a lot of pressure on everyone to give that to them.
Investigators began a search for any other evidence that might support a rudder reversal scenario. They found it on the cockpit voice recorder.
We did work on speech analysis that gave us some of our most direct evidence. There are two grunting sounds, one stronger than the other. They're both fairly short, both a fraction of a second. Grunting does not occur in routine situations. It's very unusual. In a rudder reversal, a pilot would be pushing on the rudder pedal to make a small input and would find that the pedal wouldn't respond. The harder you push down, the more the pedal would start rising against it. And a human is not strong enough to stop that motion. You're up against the entire hydraulic system of the airplane.
Brenner went back to the kinematic data to determine the precise moment the rudder moved hard to the left. He then compared that to the time of the grunts on the cockpit voice recorder.
And when we put them together, they matched up perfectly. The grunting occurs within the most critical portion of the tape, the most critical 1 second or half a second of the tape, when we believe the rudder pedal was reversing. It's circumstantial evidence, but it's the most direct evidence we have, and it's consistent with a pilot dealing with a rudder reversal emergency.
Brenner then made the same comparison using data from the Colorado Springs and East Wind incidents.
We also evaluated Colorado Springs and came to a similar conclusion, that a rudder reversal very plausibly explained how the crew performed there. And we also looked at the East Wind incident, and again, it was very plausible, including the fact that we had a surviving crew, and that's what the crew told us. So it was a case when you put all three cases together and all the evidence together, we had a single explanation that could account for all of them, and we had no other plausible alternative that was close to it.
We don't know exactly what happened, but we do know the results match reversal extremely well. And not just in one case, but in 3 cases. And that was key.
Finally, investigators had a credible scenario to explain what might have happened during the final 28 seconds of Flight 427.
The evidence indicates that the aircraft, normal flight, smooth day, hits the wake vortex from the preceding 727.
Both crew members were surprised. The captain responded and said, "She's." We believe the first officer had put in an aggressive right wheel to correct it. The airplane began to recover towards level. The wake continued and hit the tail of the airplane, which caused a yawing motion. The captain responded to it by saying, "Whoa." And the first officer responded by putting in a little bit of right rudder.
But he puts in the rudder briskly. It's a sudden input.
We believe at that point that a rudder reversal began. He would have found for the first time in his flying career that the rudder pedal wasn't responding and the wheel wasn't responding in ways he had never seen in any sort of training or any sort of flight experience.
Unfortunately now, the nose is dropping through. They're pulling back, trying to raise the nose, full right rudder in, but its reversal is really left, and the aircraft's out of control to the ground.
Won $52,000, $125,000. We are throwing the money out the door.
And Alistair's about to hit the jackpot.
Let's see if you become the most eligible bachelor in Australia.
Millionaire 8:30 tonight.
Most people don't give their vehicle's battery a second thought. Some people have to. The Exide batteries in the world's most advanced submarines are relied on to keep their crews alive at close to 500 meters below the surface. So if you want a battery you can rely on, choose Exide, the most relied on batteries in the world.
You think you don't got what the chicks think is hot? You better call a tin professor. Yo, he'll take your car and leave you one for free. He'll tint your windows for life, that's a professor guarantee. It's cool, no fool, the dark kid will rule, and the trick is to pick and be slick for the chicks. Now that's what I call a happy ending with the free mailways. Yo, the best professor, the tint professor. Way cool with the tint professor, 9874-8644.
Do you like good music? Jimmy Barnes Soul Sessions is the ultimate collector's edition CD-DVD package. The award-winning CDs Soul Deep and Soul Deeper together for the very first time. Plus the ultimate Jimmy Barnes DVD Soul Deeper Live. That's 2 classic CDs plus a feature-packed live DVD. All for just $39.95. Jimmy Barnes Soul Sessions. Available now until sold out. If you want all the latest technology and newest models, update now at Retrovision. The Hoover 7-kilo washer is just $749, and the Nilfisk 1600-watt vacuum are low $189. The Westinghouse 280-litre fridge is only $699, and Remington men's shavers are just $64.90, plus a bonus sports travel bag with every TV over $300.
Your decision is Retrovision. We've got it.
6 years in a house with no walls.
Some things take time.
And they take their toll.
I'm the most patient person I know.
Help is on its way.
It's going to be a big day.
Mitre 10 presents DIY Rescue, Tuesday on 9.
Goltz, would you please introduce the staff for the presentation of the report?
In March 1999, 4.5 years after the crash, Howder and his team presented their conclusion to the NTSB board.
Please proceed, Mr. Howder.
Today, the Safety Board staff is pleased to present the investigation report on the accident involving U.S. Air Flight 427. Unfortunately, we did not have hard physical evidence. It's based on a lot of engineering analysis, human factors analysis of 3 cases. And what we came up with is that the probability of having this happen almost identically 3 times was too great, that the most likely event was the reversal.
After 2 days of hearings, the 4-member board agreed unanimously that the most probable cause of the U.S. Air 427 crash was a rudder reversal. The longest investigation in NTSB history was over.
All of this work, which has encompassed as much as 100,000 hours of investigative time, has been accomplished to fulfill our mission to determine the probable cause of the accident, and even more importantly, to learn ways to prevent it from ever happening again.
The final report was adopted on March 24, 1999. Among its recommendations were that flight data recorders be improved to include more parameters, that pilots be better trained to respond to rudder emergencies, and that the rudder system on the Boeing 737 be redesigned to guarantee that pilots be able to override any uncommanded movement. In July 2000, the FAA announced that they were ordering Boeing to redesign the 737's rudder. The new system will have 3 control arms, so that if one jams, the other 2 can override it.
That will allow, under any circumstances, where a system may jam or fail for whatever reason, it will allow the pilot with his instinctive reactions to override that system and then control the airplane.
In the years that followed the crash, the Family Support League joined with families from other air disasters to demand legislation setting forth the rights of the families of crash victims and establishing an independent family advocate within the NTSB to look out for their interests.
We asked, who put the airlines in charge? Why are they handling all this? You know, why shouldn't there be somebody else that is more, doesn't have an interest in it?
In 1996, the Aviation Disaster Family Assistance Act was signed into law by President Clinton.
I went to shake his hand. I said, thank you, sir, for signing this bill. And he actually pulled me back and he said, no, he said, it's us that should thank you for trying to reach out and help other people.
Today, the accident site looks much as it did in the hours before the crash. In 1999, the Support League purchased the site so that it could be permanently maintained in its natural state. A small memorial stone, designed to blend in with the surrounding forest, now stands as a reminder of the 127 passengers and 5 crew members who lost their lives in the crash of Flight 427.